From the blazing shores of Vietnam to the raging sands of the Persian Gulf, the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk was a symbol of American power. Today, you will learn what lies behind its fame, a bold challenge from a Soviet submarine, and the intrusion of Russian reconnaissance aircraft challenging its invincibility. Now, as the Kitty Hawk prepares to become more scrap metal, we delve into an exciting journey through its history to uncover the secrets of encounters, battles, and mysterious encounters that forever inscribed its name in the annals of naval warfare history. The Kitty Hawk, the last conventionally powered aircraft carrier consuming bunker fuel as fuel, the ship serving in the US Navy was named after the North Carolina area where the Wright brothers first flew. It was the only American forward-based aircraft carrier in Japan. The Warship was laid down by the New York Shipbuilding Corporation in December 1956 as the first of 3 Kitty Hawk-class aircraft carriers. This class also included the combat ships America and Constellation. It was the last of the trio to be retired. The aircraft carrier had a length of 1,047 feet and a maximum speed of 35 miles per hour. Its crew consisted of 4,582 people, equipped with 4 steam catapults, and could carry between 80 and 90 aircraft. Throughout its career, it projected America's air power worldwide. It also distinguished itself from other ships of the time with some new features, including escalators for the crew, one at the bow and one at the stern. A third escalator was intended for transporting senior officers between the lower decks and the ship's bridge. Kitty Hawk was launched in May 1960 and commissioned a year later. Initially, it visited South America and then was stationed off the coast of Japan. After being redeployed to Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War and modified into a multi-purpose aircraft carrier, Kitty Hawk spent the remainder of the 1970s in the Western Pacific, picking up Vietnamese refugees and supporting Korea after the assassination of President Park Chung-hee. Then, it was sent to the Arabian Sea during the Iran hostage crisis and served in the Middle East and the Pacific until the end of its service. From 1998 to 2008, the aircraft carrier was based at a naval base in Japan. Additionally, the Kitty Hawk saw many celebrities throughout its history. US President John F. Kennedy, Nancy Sinatra, and writer John Steinbeck were just a few of the notable figures who graced its decks. Disney even used the aircraft carrier for filming the 1966 movie Lieutenant Robin Crusoe, USN. In recent years, the Navy has preferred nuclear-powered aircraft carriers as they do not require bunker fuel and have virtually unlimited range. An atomic aircraft carrier can sail immediately to address an international crisis without the need for refueling. The use of nuclear energy also reduces the logistical burden on the ship. Aircraft carriers are marvels to behold, perpetually astounding in their power and size. By their nature, they're designed to accommodate aircraft, which requires ample space for safe takeoff and landing. Therefore, it is not surprising that such ships are magnificent both in scale and cost. In 2005, the Navy announced that the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier George Washington would replace the Kitty Hawk at fleet locations in Japan. The decommissioning process began in 2008, and the ship was officially decommissioned in 2019. Over 2,000 people filled the ship's hangar deck during the retirement ceremony. The US Navy sold the ship after rejecting a request from the Kitty Hawk Veterans Association to convert the ship into a museum. The association was only able to raise about half of the amount needed to deactivate the ship and use it as a museum. Authorities stated that only ships that are decommissioned and recognized as historically significant can be museums. Neither past accomplishments nor the $5 million raised by former sailors could resolve these contradictions. At current prices, the cost of building this aircraft carrier was $2.5 billion. Also, in the late 1980s, as part of a life extension program, the ship underwent a major overhaul costing $785 million. Kitty Hawk was sold to a scrap metal recycling company at a favorable price of 1 cent. For another cent, the company also acquired the American carrier John F. Kennedy. The low price reflects several factors, including the need to tow ships around the Cape of Good Hope as they are too large to pass through the Panama Canal. The steam boilers and turbines of the huge ship no longer function, so it had to be moved by tugboat. And so, the US Navy warship Kitty Hawk arrived in the port of Brownsville in the summer of 2022 after an epic journey of 16,000 miles. The ship will be cut up for scrap metal. In its last years of existence, it earned the nickname Junkyard Kitty for its poor condition. The decommissioning process, as expected, will take between 5 to 10 years and cost approximately $750 million. Let's now talk about the ship's combat glory. Since the early 1960s and throughout that decade, the Kitty Hawk was a cornerstone of US military forces off the coast of Vietnam. At times, its planes conducted over 100 combat sorties per day over the country. On its first combat deployment in 1961, the aircraft carrier embarked 2 squadrons of Crusader fighters, 1 squadron of Skyhawk light attack aircraft, propeller-driven Sky Raider light attack aircraft, and Sky Warrior heavy attack aircraft, as well as Tracer early warning aircraft, reconnaissance planes, and retriever helicopters for aircraft protection. In those glorious years, the ship and its air wing received the Presidential Unit Citation for outstanding heroism in Vietnam operations. It was withdrawn from South Vietnam's oceanic area in the spring of 1968 during the offensive by resistance forces. In 1972, while off the coast of North Vietnam, racial tensions aboard the ship erupted into riots, resulting in up to 60 sailors injured. The US Congress later termed this a sad chapter in naval history. Racial unrest erupted on the ship amid growing tension. The causes of the incident are unclear because some say it started when charges were filed against black sailors for a fight in a Filipino bar the night before departure. But other accounts indicate it began after a black sailor was denied an extra sandwich for lunch while a white sailor was not. In any case, the confrontation was fierce. Combat actions quickly spread throughout the ship, with gangs of black and white sailors roaming the decks and attacking each other with fists, chains, wrenches, and pipes. The incident investigation maintained the position that the mutiny consisted of unprovoked attacks by a very small number of sailors. Most of the mutineers had below-average mental abilities. They had been on board for less than a year, and all of them were black. This group as a whole acted as thugs, raising questions as to whether they should have been enlisted in the military at all. The final summary of the report stated, in the early 1990s, the aircraft carrier supported US military actions in Somalia. Decades later, in the early 2000s, it served as a crucial launch pad for operations during the Iraq War, then ruled by Saddam Hussein. But the most epic battle for the ship occurred during the height of the Cold War. The Kitty Hawk collided with a Soviet nuclear submarine, obtaining a trophy in the form of a piece of the submarine's wreckage stuck in its hull. This happened in March 1984, when Task Force Bravo, led by the Kitty Hawk, was the coordinating center for the naval part of the Anvil Joint Team Spirit exercises with South Korea. In open waters, halfway between Japan and South Korea, the aircraft carrier and its accompanying ships played cat and mouse with a Soviet submarine. It was later determined to be the K-314, a 5,000-ton Victor-class ship with a crew of about 90. According to the command report, US forces tracked and destroyed or simulated their ability to sink the Soviet submarine 15 times over several days before the collision. Then, the carrier group began practicing deception methods. On the evening of March 21, 1984, K-314 appeared on the carrier's path. The commander of K-314 ordered an emergency dive to avoid collision, and soon after the start of the dive, the submarine felt a strong impact. Seconds later, a second powerful impact followed. It was clear that the submarine had not had time to reach a safe depth and was rammed by one of the American ships. As later learned, it was the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. The Soviet submarine suffered defeat from the 80,000-ton American aircraft carrier and surprisingly bore the brunt of the collision. According to the ancient report, everyone aboard the Kitty Hawk expected the submarine to sink. But the K-314 simply lost propulsion and was later towed to the Soviet port of Vladivostok. The Kitty Hawk continued on its way with the trophy of the Cold War era, a piece of the Soviet submarine's propeller embedded in its hull. The submarine commander left part one of its propellers in the carrier's hull. The aircraft carrier itself could not detect the submarine and avoid the collision due to the noise of its propellers and the pressure wave it creates in the water. The response from the Russian army took 16 years to come. At the beginning of the 21st century, the United States proudly considered itself the master of the world. On October 17, 2000, with the first rays of dawn near the far eastern borders of Russia and the waters of the Sea of Japan, the Kitty Hawk appeared. According to the plans, exercises involving the US Navy and South Korea were to take place not far from Busan Island. Intelligence confirmed that Russian air forces rarely sent their planes to observe this area. There were unsubstantiated rumors that the Russian Air Force was in dire need of fuel. Russian planes constantly faced a shortage of their main resource, leading to a reduction in combat sorties. There was no threat from the Russians. The Kitty Hawk accompanied a tanker with a large amount of necessary fuel for long exercises. The instruction for all ships in the area prohibited refueling during daylight hours. However, the military disregarded all prohibitions and refueled at their convenience both day and night. As soon as the Americans began refueling and fuel started leaking from the tanker's hose to the aircraft carrier, 2 reconnaissance planes from the Russian airfield took off. Flying at maximum permissible speed, they headed towards the violators. 2 planes were covering powerful Su-27 fighters. The mistake was underestimating Russia's military potential and its I-138 reconnaissance aircraft. The I-1 noticed the Americans' wrongful actions and reported to command. The reconnaissance data collected by this aircraft allowed a plan to be developed to eliminate the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. The Americans were horrified to see Russian planes above their heads. First, they started disconnecting the hoses through which fuel was being pumped to the aircraft carrier, possibly to avoid an explosion. They also hurried to clear the deck for their own aircraft to take off. Russian aircraft flew over the legendary Kitty Hawk twice, capturing all the unlawful actions of the American military on camera. And only after the second flyover did the first plane from the ship's deck take off into the sky. The operation showed only one thing. If these plane sorties were not demonstrative but combat, the invincible aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk would have been destroyed in seconds. All American media dubbed this failed operation a real insult from Russia to the American fleet. Having served its time, the Kitty Hawk goes down in history, leaving behind a legacy of courage, strength, and sacrifice. It witnessed the greatest battles in the darkest hours, but always remained a symbol of hope and indomitable spirit. And if you enjoyed the video, you can like, subscribe to the channel, and the next part won't keep you waiting long.